All right. So
Thank you.
everyone, welcome to our last presentation of the day. The title of our presentation is A Case Study of a Telecollaborative Intercultural Communication Project between the US and Japan. And our speakers today are Sarah Davis from Iowa State University and Joe Geluso from Nihon University in Tokyo. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for being here on the last presentation of the day in this room. I guess there's one more downstairs too, but the overview of my talk is that I'm going to present to you the context of the study that we did. It's a Trans-Pacific virtual exchange. And I want to give you a little bit of the background of our theoretical foundation about telecollaborative learning and project-based learning. And then I'm going to share with you the actual collaboration video project that our class is engaged in. I'll explain the design and the components and share a few examples, and then show how the student reflections and feedback gave us information about this project. Then I'll explain our data collection and analysis methods, and I will share what our results are and just our conclusions. So to start with, I want to explain our teaching context. So we had one class as an undergraduate engineering students in a technical communications class in the United States. And it was supposed to have a US study abroad component, but we were not able to travel. So this small cohort class carried on nonetheless. And we had an undergraduate student in advanced English at a large private university in Tokyo. And very significantly, intercultural competence is a course goal that is shared by both of these courses. It took place in joint Zoom sessions on Monday night, Iowa time, and Tuesday morning, Japan time. And it took place in over 5 weeks, April through May. There was kind of a limiting factor that was the fact that our calendars do not align well, neither do our clocks, okay? Students were actually grouped into 4 mixed teams. 3 of them were made of 3 students based in Japan and 2 in the US, and there was 1 group that was a 2 and 2. And they were tasked with a multi-step project to create an instructional video. The audience would be US university students planning to study abroad in Japan. And the purpose would be to provide usable instructions, and the topic is something a visitor to Japan will need to be able to do. And these represent a very authentic communication needs for these particular participants. So it's almost like there's a perfect rhetorical triangle just right there in the project itself. So our theoretical background includes studies on how telecollaboration can support language and intercultural learning, and research into the effect of virtual exchange on global citizenship competencies. However, most significant to our study is this meta-analysis by Chipchie and Savas that looked into the way that telecollaborative projects are usually conducted. And most researchers identify that training the students in the technology is vital to the success of those collaborations. And here is where we found our gap. We were really curious about why that was emphasized in all these studies. You've got to train the students first and then let them go. And then we also are interested in the potential for project-based learning to support some of the outcomes. And so as we know with these definitions here, Project-based learning is an instructional approach that contextualizes learning by presenting learners with problems to solve or products to develop. And where students are socialized through activities that involve simultaneous learning of language, content, and skills. And we know that ultimately these things are very learner-centered, as autonomy in choice and negotiation is part of project development in project-based learning. So the primary goals of our study are, one, to explore students' tech choices and their patterns of use when they are not instructed on what technology to use. So we wanted to look both at their communications choices and their task completion choices for technology. And number two, we wanted to better understand students' perceptions and attitudes about working with people from other cultures on a project, and about language and communication with people who do not share their L1. So we had this collaborative video project that was spanned across 5 weeks, but the main work was done in the first 4 weeks. And this is just an outline. This kind of shows you some of the activities that took place, and the blue are the actual deliverables for each week that culminate in this final presentation that ends up in week 5. Our assignment sheet provided overall structure, and it actually even had links to some of the supporting documents. Like in week 2, there's a storyboard, so we had a template for them. So it told them what they had to produce, but it does not tell them how. It doesn't give any instruction of not only how to do the tasks, but even how to organize themselves. Makes no suggestions. And then each of these, there's a weekly reflection that happens, and that was a really important element for grounding the learning, but it also is important for our data collection. So here's an example. If you look at the top of this previous slide, you know, they had to first to get to know each other, icebreakers, and form their teams. And so they came up with just really unique things that generated their own ideas. They thought about what the task was. Think about students who are visiting Japan. What do they need to know? And they came up with these ideas, and they came up with names, and they negotiated these. Just to give you a sample reflection from one of the first week, this is a student in Japan who said, my team members have high English skills, so our meeting is smooth. And this is a student who's located in Japan who had other team members in Japan whose language skills were higher than theirs. Joe actually used 2 classes, so one was an intermediate and one was more advanced. And this student goes on to say, I was doing my best to listen, but it was difficult for me to talk in English. And this shows a little metacognition of understanding the difference between productive and receptive skills. And then it says the highlight was when one of my team members in Japan said to one of the US team members that he looks like Captain America. Come to think of it, he sort of does. You might notice that I'm calling them students in Japan and students in the US because we had international students in the United States, and we had international students in Japan who were not L1 Japanese speakers, and we had non-L1 English speakers. So that was an interesting distinction there. So here's another example from the project. When we said they had to do storyboarding, we gave them this template, and they had to fill in their plan for what shots they were going to take. And this is one about visiting shrines, all of the protocol for visiting shrines. And so they would plan their shots. We have to go out and show their way from the train station how to get to the shrine. And then when you get there, you walk through these various food stalls. And then it's very important when you get there how you wash your hands. So we're going to show them that. So they planned in advance, and they talked about it, and they shared this with their teammates who didn't know about what it would mean to go to a shrine. So then I am not sure what happened here. It's just jumping. So it's jumping 2 slides. It's jumping like 10 slides away. Not sure why. I want to go to slide 11. And this is not slide 11. Where is slide 11? There it is. We'll do this. So this is just to give you a few seconds of the video itself and share with you what they ended up doing. You can see this is the group that called itself the Hair. When you see the video, you'll probably understand why. And I think that the way that Zoom is making my life miserable is making it that I can't get to play this. How can end the show? Sorry, just a minute. And is it good?
Hey guys,
Okay. Echoing now. Did it stop? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but I can't. How do I get back? How do I get this off? Sorry, this is really not. This worked perfectly when I wasn't trying to Zoom. No, because it's in the wrong screen. I think it's, I need to, I'll try it again, but it seemed like it went right back to showing Chrome in front. Thank you. And that's not where I need to be. Okay. And I'm sorry that I'm having technology difficulties. The Zoom seems to be co-opting my computer in multiple ways. And now I don't even. Okay, is this working better now? I'll try to do this. Thank you. So just looking at our research methods, we had 3 main data sources, the weekly reflection prompts, which had very text-centered questions in blue, and then sociocultural ones in brown. I'm not going to go into these because I've run out of time for that. But we asked a variety of questions, and then we had summative reflection prompts. And these were more important because these were longer narratives. The weekly ones were more like 1 or 2 sentences, and these ones produced quite a bit of text for us to analyze. And so how did technology facilitate your collaboration? What were the limitations? And we asked them about successes and challenges. So those are kind of positive and negative words that would solicit them to kind of think about that range of their feelings about it. And then things about global citizenship and international communication. And then our summative reflections, again, very much at the end, these were in-depth questions. And then there was a post-interview after they had presented. In the final presentation, they got to see each other's videos finally. They didn't see the other projects, and so they got to think about it and be reflective. So we have data analysis here to present, and we took the sentences from each of these and coded them by theme. So we looked for whether they mentioned technology, sociocultural, or language and communication. And there were a few that were other. And then we also coded them for sentiment, positive, neutral, and negative. And this was an iterative process, and we had to both Joe and I, going through them all, and then we had to negotiate any differences, and guess how many there were? Very few, surprisingly. So to just present the tech choices, we were actually impressed with the range and variety. This left column will show you that it was kind of distributed across quite a few tech communications choices. And we'll talk more about the comments from the interviews on some future slides. Then for task completion, here's where it's important to note that we have a weakness in our methodology, which is that both our institutions subscribe to the Google Suite. And so they were kind of naturally embedded in there, but they still ranged out into a few other available tech options. And here's from the summative reflection line gathers us all together so that we can share our own opinion in a group. We also use iPhone to film video and edit it. The limitation is filming on iPhone is not that clear to watch. And that was a student in Japan's quote. And then the video tasks, this also surprised us that there was such a range of video editing, and that some of the groups actually both did some editing. And so even though there's only 4 groups, there's even more mixing in of different technologies and talking about it. And here's a quote: "I think things are going very well. I'm looking forward to the completion because I was able to take the picture as expected on the storyboard. In particular, it was good to demonstrate the scenes of drawing omikuji and washing hands, and the list goes on. However, the narration needs to be corrected a little more." And I'm sorry, I don't have the participant number there, but that was a student in Japan. And so this is what they thought about the lack of instruction. For learning new technology, I heard about Power Director from a friend, and it seems like a lot of people use it. I feel like in the US and abroad, Snapchat is commonly used, and that's not used much in Japan, so I thought it would have been nice to use and see what it's like. For autonomy, they said it was difficult because we had to think for ourselves, but I feel that this made it more rewarding. Coming from the perspective of not being proficient with video editing, I actually thought the lack of specific instruction motivated more interaction between our group members as we negotiated how to go about preparing the video. And hands off was good, as it allowed us to interact more with our friends in Japan and solve problems together. So our take on these tech choices is that the breadth of apps was pretty impressive and unexpected. The lack of instruction seems to have encouraged more interaction. The choice probably adds a sense of agency and autonomy and authenticity, especially when they can make personal choices. This is my technology. And that we did not encounter a single salient problem or complaint about that. So we asked them pointedly, was it okay that we didn't tell you? And nobody came up with something negative about it. So in the findings, I will let you know that I'll remind you, there were 11 students in Japan and 8 in USA, so about 65 sentences and 45, and they were overwhelmingly in this positive and neutral when it came to sentiment about technology. The US expressed slightly higher in the negative set of sentences. So remember, these were coded. We divided up what they said into individual iterations and individual sentences. So an example of what's positive, things that we coded as positive as a group: none of us struggled with limitations regarding technology. We even added each other on social media. Using social media application line contributed greatly to interacting more. Things that were neutral were things like we use Zoom for video communication and Google Docs for writing collaboration. So they were just kind of neutral statements. And then negative sentences would be things like, when we communicated with ISU students using Gmail, the time difference got in the way. And this is interesting because, like, the word however is the thing that kind of makes it be like, that made it more negative. So there were some pragmatics about the way that it was expressed that indicated negativity and positivity. expended a lot of time to do. That certainly is a negative. So socioculturally, wow, we really felt, we were just impressed with the 93 and 95% positive to neutral. And I will say that the negative ones tended to be ones that were like the self-effacing ones, the ones where they were meeting their own feeling of, oh, I was kind of, I felt bad. I'll share one where a US student felt guilty that they also didn't speak Japanese, right? So overall sentiment, positive things are, I think, not only the results of this project, but the process was the best because we were able to work. Okay. So socioculturally, we ended up with a lot of the same kind of like things I mentioned that were negative and positive, and language and communication kind of followed that same pattern. So I don't have time to present to you all of these, but they will be made available later. And I will say to you that in conclusion, technology is prevalent, it's cultural, it's personal. Choice is learner-centered, and autonomy equals authenticity. And project-based negotiations over technology and process choices present very much authentic communication tasks, and authentic communication tasks foster sociocultural growth with language learning. And that is all I have time for to share with you today.
So do we have any questions or comments from the audience? I know that we have one from the Zoom. Mati, should we ask Catherine to? So Catherine in Zoom I think is talking right now.
This was fascinating and I really appreciated it, and I've done a lot of these exchanges and I find this really interesting, but what I really want to know is, why are they called the hare?
Well, I tried to show you on the video that the two US students involved in it had shockingly gorgeous, long, thick, locks of blonde hair. And I think that I can assume that it was part of the conversation that their team had about their impressive blonde hair. And so they enjoyed it. They enjoyed kind of teasing each other about it. So I'm glad that was your question.
Hey, Sarah, my question is that sometimes instructors are hesitant to assign multimodal projects because they think, I have to be the expert in all of this technology. What would you say to them?
So as you know, that we need to demonstrate lifelong learning. And we also need to realize the day and age that we live in is an ever-changing one. And so I think that digital natives, as they're called, grow up in this environment and they think they're rather tech savvy, but really, I think most of us are really just consumers of different technologies. And just because I haven't played around with that technology doesn't mean I'm deficient in my tech savviness. So I think we need to stop thinking that it's part of that thing of just showing vulnerability in the classroom, period. But it's also that thing of not really thinking that you're going to break something. You can't really break it, if you try that technology. And stand out of the way, stand back, let your students surprise you. Yeah.
And Catherine added another note saying that the choose your type of tech is the model we use for telecollaborations too. When we dictated what sort of tech students need, they complained. So yeah.
Right.
John, did you have a question?
I don't have any questions. I'm just I noticed that when you said that the students, or when you cited research that said that students needed to be taught what type of tech to use, the research was about 10 years old. And so I think especially post-pandemic, it's, people know how to use Zoom. They know how, they don't need our guidance the way they did, certainly 10 years ago.
Yes. And our next question is from Chung Yang.
So I'm wondering whether there was any kind of extra work of students outside of the curriculums, and then whether there is any kind of technological intervention to help that kind of extra work, some extra curriculum activities.
So whether these activities were outside of their regular class activity, they were ingrained in the syllabus for my class and Joe's class. So he adjusted. I knew that I was going to be doing this or trying to do this because I had tried it the year before. And I did with a different university, different set of students, the whole thing. So I kind of had a pilot before. 1 year before, and I was hoping that we could travel to Japan, but we still couldn't. And so Joe and I planned this several months in advance. And so we put it into our syllabus that they were going to do this. And so the products from that regular technical communications course were that they had to make a set of instructions and that they had to develop team collaborative rules and charters and things like that. So it mapped right into my curriculum and my syllabus. Thanks for asking. Yeah. It wasn't extra. That's also how I got IRB approval, right? It was just regular classroom activity.
Any other questions from the audience? I actually had a question.
Okay.
It's very interesting to see the breakdown in this figure too about the sentiment. The 36 sentences from Japanese students and the 21 sentences from the USA students. I was just wondering, like, how many actual students those came from, the sentences. Yeah.
So there were 11 students in Japan, and there were 8 in the US. And when it came to rating these all came from the summative. And so there was a huge difference in how much people answered. They could do paragraphs, or some of them just gave a few sentences. And we really had no regulation on that. And the norming of this is going to come. I took out a slide that talks about how we're going to triangulate the other 2 sources that we have over time. So Joe is more of the computer-assisted language learning scholar, and he will certainly do that research end of it when we get to that stage. But we were just excited to share the results of the project.
Norming will happen in next steps.
Yeah, as in the next steps, because we even have more data now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, so let's give our presenters a round of applause. Thank you so much.